Okay, so last Monday, so we talk about happy family, right? So sa happy family, kailangan maramdaman natin na you belong, nakabilang ka sa pamilya for you to be able to feel happy. So yun yung pinapakita ng picture na to. So the girl behind the happy family, hindi niya nararamdaman na kabilang siya. So maybe because she's an orphan, o kaya naman, maybe because na wala talaga siyang family. Diba? So nakakaramdam siya ng inggit to this boy in front of her na mahal ng kanyang parents. So for you to be able to feel happy, kailangan maging kabilang ka. Maging kabilang ka muna. So dito nga sabi, a happy family is a family who spend time together. So kasama ka dapat. Love and understand each other. Again, kasama ka rin dapat dyan. And get on well together. So laging may attachment together. Hindi pwedeng mawala yun. Okay, dito naman, pinanood nyo last time yung story ni St. Peter Claver, but we're not going to have this anymore today. So St. Peter Claver is, ang tawag sa kanya, the title, he's entitled The Slave of the Slaves. Yun ang title na binigay sa kanya. And also, the Apostle of the Negroes. Okay? Ito yung titles baka kamalito kayo. Iba pa yung sinasabing patron of the African missions, patron of African Americans. Iba pa yon. So, yun ay pagiging patron saint niya. Pero hindi siya yung mismong title. Para malinaw sa inyo lahat. So that's St. Peter Claver. Kung makikita niyo yung picture na yan, he's taking care of the Negroes, of the Africans, of the African slaves who went to America. Yes.
Sina Angel po wala pong wifi. Kaya po hindi
Yes, okay na. Alam ko. Mamaya na lang. Okay? So for today, I'm going to introduce to you si Blessed Margaret of Castello. Okay? So si St. Margaret of Castello, siya ang patron ng mga pangit. Imagine, meron palang patron ng meron palang patron saint ng mga pangit. Siya rin ang patron saint ng lahat ng mga hindi ginusto. Mga inayawan. Yan. Aray ko naman, inayawan. Patron ng mga iniwan. Patron ng mga inabandona. At siya rin ang patron ng mga pilay. Yan. So just sit tight, relax. Manonood uli kayo ngayon ng buhay ni Blessed Margaret of Castello.
Blessed Margaret of Castello. To be honest, she's one of my favourite Catholics to have ever lived. Born to parents that did not love her, she was blind, had severe curvature of the spine, was a dwarf, and also had her left leg shorter than her right leg. In the eyes of the world, she was pitiful. In the eyes of Jesus, she was a holy child of God whom he had an amazing plan for. This is the story of Blessed Margaret of Castello. She was born in Perugia, Italy in 2087 to the noble family of Perizio and Emilia in the Matola castle. Now this noble family, as soon as they found out that they were having a child, they planned on throwing a massive party and celebration. They thought the child was going to be born a boy and end up grown up like his dad. To their horror, their child was a girl, and worse, in their eyes, she was blind, a dwarf, with a number of other impediments. Her parents, who did not want to damage their reputation, kept the girl hidden from everyone else until about the age of 6, only allowing her in certain areas of the castle. Until the day she was almost discovered, around that age of 6, by some of her parents' visitors, who saw this lonely child roaming around the castle. They were about to ask who she was and who her parents were before the maid stepped in. Her parents found out about this ordeal, and they now thought it was too risky to allow her about a small area of the castle, and they then imprisoned her for about a decade in a room attached to the residence's chapel. So they knew how much Margaret loved church and the Blessed Sacraments, so that was their excuse to lock the freak up. But unlike her parents, who not only hated their daughter but despised her, her parents' chaplain showed an interest in Margaret. He noticed how smart Margaret was when it came to the faith. Margaret knew that her sufferings brought her closer to Jesus, because that was his life. He went through the worst possible suffering when it came to Calvary. Not only this, but Margaret still loved her parents because they took care of her and they made sure she had enough food and water to live. She was very grateful for that. Now, some people around the town knew of this blind dwarf girl who was kept in these atrocious conditions, but they were too afraid to say anything for fear of what her father, Percio, might do to them. He was known as being rather violent and hot-tempered. So Margaret was kept in this prison environment for around 10 years. Now, there came a time when Margaret got a bit older, around 16 to 20 years, when there were rumours of miracles being performed at a Franciscan church in a nearby town called Castello. Margaret's parents' eyes lit up. Who knows, maybe they will be able to cure their blind freak of a girl, and they will never have to worry about their reputation again. So, they took Margaret to this church in another town, and they told their daughter to pray as hard as she could. They then left her there for the day praying. Nearing the end of the day, they came back and they peered round at their blind daughter, hoping she was cured. What? She was not healed. No, she would never be healed. At that moment that they saw that the Lord had not cured their daughter, they abandoned Margaret and they fled back to their hometown. So now the end of the day had come, and the friar had come round to close the church. He found Margaret praying. "Come on, little girl, we're closing up now." "Oh, it's closing time," Margaret said. "My parents should be here as well." The friar replied, "Little girl, you're the only one in the church." The friar then left Margaret.
Wala.
How lucky I am that they took care of me for as long as they did. They fed me and they kept me alive. And yes, it's about time that I stopped being so lazy and I took care of myself. Margaret knew that the pathway to Jesus was through suffering. Never before had she felt so close to God. As time passed on, the people of Castello began to notice Margaret. How holy she is, praying all the time. Every time we see her, she has a smile on her face, asking how we are. How can this be when she has such deformities? So after living on the streets for a while, she eventually got accepted into a convent. However, the nuns there had become accustomed to living a quite comfortable life, not going by the original rules of the convent. Margaret, only wanting to please God, decided that she must stick to the original rules because that was what God wanted. So she made sure that in silent times that she actually kept silent, and she never accepted outside gifts from anyone. The nuns, they did not like this because it made them look bad. So they kicked out Margaret onto the streets again. It was at this point where she was tempted by the devil. It was as if the devil knew this was his last opportunity to get this holy girl. Margaret thought, maybe I should just obey God a little less so I can get back this love from the nuns and stay there once more. This love that I was missing from my parents my whole life, a love that I never got. But then she thought back to the years where she was imprisoned in that little room, where she would meditate on the life and sufferings of Jesus. Jesus went through the worst suffering possible, and she saw this as a beautiful opportunity to get close to Christ. Again, she did not hate the nuns for this. Instead, she left feeling grateful for the nuns for allowing her to stay at the convent, even when she did not behave exactly like them. After a while longer on the streets, she became known to the friars from the Dominicans. Margaret was admitted to the local chapter and spent the rest of her life at this religious order. There she visited the poorest of the poor, the most unwanted. She could be seen limping throughout town, going to the sick and the dying. Margaret knew that the pathway to Christ was through suffering, so she would also take on extra mortification, like waking up at 12 p.m. and not sleeping for those hours every night. And she prayed instead. She fasted 4 days of the week, and on Fridays she only took a little bread and water. Also, in addition to the prescripted prayers, Margaret recited all 150 psalms and 2 religious offices. Because of Margaret's extraordinary love for the poor, her daily penance, her suffering for the love of the world, she grew extremely close to God. This closeness to God helped her perform a couple of miracles in her later life, including elevating whilst in prayer. If there ever was a forgotten saint, it would be Blessed Margaret of Castello, who I personally believe is in heaven. She was forgotten as a child, unloved, in fact, actually hated by her parents. But instead of doing the same, she did the opposite, loving the least, the last, but most importantly, loving God.
Nakamute pala ako. Okay, so there you go, no? Napanood niyo yung buhay ni Blessed Margaret of Castello. Okay, so ulitin ko lang, parang re-rephrase ko lang yung mga words na ginamit sa kwento. No? So Blessed Margaret Castello was born, was born in the 14th century in Metola, Italy. And Metola, Italy, doon siya pinanganak. Wala to sa sa lecture niyo, ha? So, Blessed Margaret Castello was born in the 14th century in Metola, Italy. Ang kanyang mga parents, mga noble family. When you say noble family, sila yung mga kilalang tao. Mayaman at may matataas at katungkulan sa gobyerno at sa simbahan. Si Margaret ay ipinanganak na babae. Nagkataon naman ang gusto ng mga magulang niya ay isang lalaki. Para, siyempre, kung lalaki, siya yung susunod sa mga yapak ng kanyang ama. So, siyempre, dahil sa kadahilanan ito, she was unwanted. Hindi na siya ginusto. Kasi nga, babae siyang ipinanganak. Tapos, ipinanganak pa siyang unano. May dwarfism. Yan, meron siyang dwarfism. Unano siya. Pinanganak siyang bulag. She was blind. Pinanganak siyang kuba. Mayroong problema sa kanyang spine nung ipinanganak siya. At hindi rin pantay ang mga paa niya. Okay? Hindi pantay ang mga paa niya. So she was lame. L-A-M-E. She was also lame. So yun yung mga katangian, yung mga, yung sabihin, parang yun ang mga binigay na parang sinumpa. Parang sinumpa si Blessed Margaret. Kaya naman, dahil sa itsura nga niya, itinuring siyang isang malaking kahihiyan ng pamilya. Kaya naman, ang naging decision ng family, ikinulong si Blessed Margaret sa isang kwarto, sa tuktok ng tore ng kanilang kastilyo. So yes. Sa castle sila nakatira. Kasi sabi ko, noble family. Sina Blessed Margaret of Castello sa castle nakatira. So yun nga, kumbaga parang tayo ngayon, nangyayari kay Blessed Castello, tayo ngayon naka-lockdown. Siya ay nakakulong. Her parents made sure na nakakulong siya sa tuktok ng tore nila. Pero at the same time, her parents made sure na nakakakain siya ng maayos. Okay, so sabi ko nga, ang example ko nga noon, yung panahon natin ngayon during the pandemic, tayong lahat nakakulong sa kanilang mga bahay. Bawal lumabas. Okay. So isang araw, when Margaret is already 6 years old, yung mga edad 6 years old, si Margaret, isa sa nagkaroon ng pagtitipon sa kanilang bahay, sa kanilang castle. So sa labas yun, siguro sa garden. Isa sa mga bisita, napansin si Margaret. Siguro pasilip-silip sa bintana, okay, naglalaro, gano'n, ano. Muntikan nang ma-discover yung kanyang katauhan. At muntikan na rin siyempre mabulgar yung itinatagong sekreto ng family. So nangyari, iminove si Margaret. Inilipat. Dinala si Margaret sa isang sa chapel kasi malawak yung sakop nung kanilang lupain ng family ni Margaret. So do sa kanilang lupain, bandang forest, may forest din sila. Somewhere there in the middle of the forest, merong chapel. So in the chapel, dinala si Margaret at doon ikinulong. Okay? And imagine, hindi lang siya basta ikinulong. Ikinulong siya sa isang kwartong walang pintuan. There's no door. Bintana lang ang meron kung saan pwedeng iabot yung kanyang foods. So, si Margaret of Castello, ikinulong doon sa chapel na yon for about 10 years. So, kanina 6 years old siya, di ba? So, another 10 years, nakulong uli siya. So, ngayon, nung after noon, 16 years old na siya. Nung 16 years old na si Margaret of Castello, nabalitaan ng parents niya na merong merong miracle na nangyayari sa Franciscan Church sa Castello, Italy. So Castello, Italy na. So ginawa ng parents niya, dinala siya doon. Dinala si Margaret of Castello sa Castello, Italy, doon sa Franciscan Church na nagbabaka sakali na magkakaroon ng milagro at mapapagaling si Margaret. So siyempre, kung gagaling si Margaret, hindi na kailangang itago pa ng family yung kanyang katauhan. Kasi magaling siya eh. Hindi na siya kuba, hindi na siya pilay, hindi siya bulag, hindi siya unano. So kung ganun, hindi na siya ikakahiya ng family, di ba? So sabi sa kanya, mag-pray ka na mag-pray as hard as you can para ikaw ay pagalingin ng Panginoon. So ang ginawa ng parents niya, nag-pray siya ng pray. Iniwanan muna siya sa church habang nagdadasal si Margaret. 2 days after, walang nangyari. Hindi gumaling si Margaret. So ang ginawa ng family niya, habang si Margaret ay nagdadasal sa loob ng simbahan, yung parents ngayon ni Margaret umuwi na. Iniwanan siya mag-isa doon sa Franciscan Church sa Castello, Italy. Mag-isa lang si Margaret noon. Imagine, 16 years old, iniwan siya habang yung parents niya umuwi na sa kanila sa Metola. Ngayon, so nangyari, naghintay si Margaret, nasunduin siya, pero walang parents na dumating, hindi na siya sinundo. Kasi iniwan na nga siya, inabandon siya. Kaya one of the reasons why na siya ang patron saint ng lahat ng mga iniwan sa buhay. Si Margaret of Castello ang isang patron saint ng mga abandoned. So inabandon na si Margaret. Nagpagala-gala ngayon si Margaret sa Castello. May mga naawa sa kanya at siya ikinupkop sa pinakain. Yung mga local villagers, siyempre, they felt sorry for Margaret. They took care of her at winelcome sa kanilang mga bahay. So buti na lang may mababait pala yung mga local villagers ng Castello, Italy. So sila yung mga kumupkop sa kanya. Tandaan ang kumupkop sa kanya ay mga local villagers ng Castello. Okay, so umabot ngayon nagstay siya muna doon sa Castello sa mga villagers hanggang sa dumating sa point na nakapasok si Margaret sa kumbento. So sa kumbento, nag-aaral siya doon para maging madre. Pero pagdating sa kumbento, naging unwanted na naman si Margaret. Naging unwanted uli siya dahil sa hindi nagustuhan ng mga kapwa niya madre yung pagiging sobrang masunurin ni Margaret sa mga rules ng kumbento at saka siyempre masunurin sa Panginoon. So, ang nangyayari, nagiging masama yung image ng ibang madre dahil sa pinapakita ni Margaret. Kaya nangyayari, balik na naman siya sa lansangan, balik ulit sa kalye si Margaret kasi ayaw nga sa kanya ng mga madre, ng mga kapwa niya madre doon. Nung pagdating sa labas, nakalabas siya ng kumbento, she was tempted again by the devil. She was tempted. Nagtanong si Margaret sa kanyang sarili. Kailangan ko bang bawasan ang pagiging masunurin ko sa Panginoon para matanggap ako ng mga kapwa ko madre? And at the same time, para makabalik na rin ako sa loob ng kumbento. Yun ang naisip niya. Kasi nga sobrang masunurin niya eh. Kaya inayawan siya. So naisip niya, siguro kailangan bawasan ko na yung pagiging masunurin. Ngayon, pero bandang huli, naisip niya, no, hindi ko na pala dapat gawin yun. I must continue to suffer to get closer to God. Okay? Yun ang sinabi ni Margaret sa sarili niya. I must continue to suffer to get closer to God. Tandaan ha? Open and close quotation. I must continue to suffer to get closer to God. Yun ang mga sinambit ni Blessed Margaret Castello. So yun sa paglipas ng panahon, nakasama na ni Margaret ang mga praile at naging isang Dominican sister, naging Dominican nun. Doon, itinuon niya yung sarili niya sa pangangalaga sa mga most unwanted people. Poorest of the poor. Yan yung mga inalagaan niya. Sick and dying people. Mga bilanggo, prisoners. So ginawa niya yon sa kabila ng mga kapansanan niya. Tanda niya, may kapansanan siya. Bulag siya, kuba, hindi pantay ang paa. Diba? Dahil dito sa mga ginawa niya, siya ay mas lalo pang naging malapit sa Panginoon. Kaya sabi niya kanina, I must continue to suffer to get closer to God. Tapos ang ginawa niya, nung naging Dominican sister siya, mas lalo pa siyang napalapit sa Panginoon kasi pinalagaan niya yung mga most unwanted people, the poorest of the poor, sick and dying people, prisoners, yun ang mga pinupuntahan niya. So nangyari ngayon, si Blessed Margaret Castello, from being rejected, naging accepted na siya. Diba? From being rejected, from being unwanted, naging katanggap-tanggap na siya, tinanggap na siya ng tao. So yan ang naging buhay ni Sister Margaret. Diba? Nung una, nung last Monday, ang pinag-usapan natin is si St. Peter Claver. So siya naman, inalagaan niya yung mga slaves. So he became, naging title niya is the slave of the slaves. Ito ngayon si Margaret Castello, ang inalagaan niya ay mga most unwanted people, mga hindi ginustong tao, mga poorest of the poor, the sick and dying people, the prisoners, di ba? Dito ngayon, pinapaalala sa atin ni Blessed Margaret or ni Sister Margaret na hindi importante ang itsura. Kahit gaano ka pakapangit. Pagdidiinan ko, kahit gaano ka pakapangit. Ang mas mahalaga kasi ay ang pagmamahal natin sa Panginoon. At same time, mamahalin natin ang mga nagmamahal sa atin. Right? So nung una, kay St. Peter Claver, ang pinapakita naman niya ay there's no racial discrimination. Kahit sino ka pa, kahit ano pa ang kulay ng iyong balat, mahal ka ng Panginoon. Tanggap ka niya sa kanyang kaharian. Tanggap ka niya sa kanyang pamilya. While Blessed Margaret Castello, pinapakita naman na kahit ano pa ang itsura mo, pangit ka man, pilay ka man, bulag ka man, kahit ano pa man din ang mga kapansanan mo, kahit ano pang meron ka sa buhay, you're accepted by God. Mahal ka niya. Mamahalin ka niya. Okay? So, I would like to gusto ko sana kayong invite to pray with me. Okay? So, please unmute everyone. In the name of the Father, of the Son, of the Holy Spirit. Everyone, bye-bye. Dear Jesus, thank you for inviting us to belong to your family. Thank you for your love. May we follow your footsteps. Guide us always that we may continue to serve you and others. Amen. Son, so yun, sana may natutunan kayo for today, ano? Sana may natutunan kayo mula kay na St. Peter Claver at saka kay Blessed Margaret of Castello. Na both of them ay ginawa lahat ng mga kaya nila to be able to help the people. Minahal niya ang mga taong minahal niya yung mga tao na hindi minamahal ng iba. So you have to commit your way unto the Lord. So sa balik ko lang ulit si St. Peter Claver. So si St. Peter Claver, naramdaman ng mga slaves, naramdaman ng mga Africans, mga Negroes na sila ay kabilang sa pagmamahal ng Panginoon, sa pamilya ng Panginoon, nang matanggap nila ang sacrament of baptism. Okay? Doon nila naramdaman 'yon. Through the presence of St. Peter Claver. Tapos naman si Blessed Margaret, naramdaman niya na siya accepted kahit ano pa ang itsura niya. Kasi mahal din niya ang Panginoon. Tapos yung pagmamahal na 'yon, isinare din niya sa iba. Minahal din niya ang mga kapwa niya, minahal niya ang mga, ulitin ko poorest of the poor. Usually mga unwanted people, the poorest of the poor, sick and dying people, prisoners. Sila yung mga the most unwanted people sa mundong ibabaw na to. So yun na naging mission niya. Sila yung mga pinuntahan niya, inalagaan, minahal. Okay? So, masabi ko, as members of God's family, tayo, no? Tayo kasi miyembro ng pamilya ng Panginoon. So, we are expected to obey God's commandments. Alam niyo bang God's commandments? The 10 commandments of God? Alam niyo? Hindi pa. Anyway, yung God's commandments, if you're going to make it short, the first one is to love God. Mahalin ang Panginoon ng higit sa lahat. Okay? Tapos secondly, love each other. Mahalin natin ang kapwa natin gaya ng pagmamahal natin sa Panginoon. And the rest of the commandments will follow. Okay? First is love God above all else. And secondly is love one another. Okay, so let us love one another and work. Okay, we should work in fellowship with Jesus rather. So trust also in Him, and He will bring it to pass. Right? Try to remember that. Tapos